Hi, everyone. I know that many people are not celebrating the holiday today, the Independence Day holiday. There's a lot of fear, anger, disgust um, over the passing of the one big, beautiful budget bill. um, and, a lot of people are struggling with what action they can do today or inaction. And I myself was struggling with that, and I picked up a book from my library, my personal library. But this is a book that I turn to sometimes, and it is César Chávez, An Organizer's Tale. It's a collection of his speeches by Penguin Classics, and I'm going to read one to you today because I felt like it was really appropriate. It's titled, What is Democracy? This speech, delivered in 1982, allows Chavez to reflect on the pertinence of multiculturalism in the United States. He describes democracy as a system that works only when citizens are active participants. After 30 years organizing poor people, I have become convinced that the two greatest aspirations of humankind are equality and participation. These yearnings are indivisible because equality can only be experienced through participation and self-determination. Democracy is not an impassive system. It is sustained by people's involvement, and participation in the democratic process is a key strategy in nonviolent struggle. Free men and women instinctively prefer democratic change to any other means. It is only the enslaved and shackled, those without hope or faith, who seek violent solutions to their problems. It is precisely to overcome this frustration and hopelessness that we in the farm workers movement have involved masses of people in their own struggle. Thus, demonstrations and marches, strikes and boycotts are not only weapons against the growers, but our way of avoiding the senseless violence that brings no honor to any class or community. The boycott, as Gandhi taught us, is the most nearly perfect instrument for nonviolent change, allowing masses of people to participate actively in a cause. Participation in democracy, exercising the power to control our own future, is the best hope for a nonviolent solution to the injustices we face as farm workers, minorities, or poor people. It is also the only hope our nation has of enduring and in surviving in a world where the have-nots increasingly vie for ascendancy against the traditional forces of wealth and influence now concentrated in Western society. Yet, instead of recognizing these truths, our country, through its archaic immigration policies and practices, has created an underclass of exploited and ostracized men and women who are excluded from participation, which has been the key to improvement for generations of U.S. immigrants. Instead of promoting humanity's fundamental aspirations, equality, and participation, our immigration policies and the practices of many U.S. employers have endorsed the twin plagues of humanity: exploitation and discrimination. These scourges are most vividly demonstrated in America by cheap wages and wretched working conditions for immigrant workers. For these workers, such exploitation and the poverty it brings destroys their spirits, wastes their potential, and blunts their ideals. It confines them to a daily struggle for survival to simply put bread on the table. That daily struggle for survival cheats people of the finer things in life: education, religion, and involvement in government and politics. Primero comer que ser cristiano. You must eat before you are a Christian, goes an old Mexican saying. America has not yet learned the lesson that in this day and age, you cannot have your cake and eat it too. Some of our basic industries, most of agriculture and segments of the garment and service industries, to name a few, have prospered in recent times by exploiting undocumented immigrants. Employers want their cheap labor and their docile acceptance of miserable working and living conditions. Yet we as a nation don't want these same immigrants to stake a claim to the promise this country offers to people here and around the world. When I was a child, I remember that crossing the border illegally was considered a tremendous crime. It used to be. But now many no longer think of it as a crime. People say, no, I'm going to the US because I need to work. I need to support my kids. I need a better life. In this age of television, films, and commercial advertising, when the poor in third world countries are endlessly reminded of the prosperity that is always beyond their reach, the stigma of crossing borders vanishes. It is no longer a crime in the minds of many people to cross a border to feed their hungry families. Until we recognize the powerful forces that lure so many immigrants to this land, forces that we often ignite, we can never fashion a policy that will adequately address the acute immigration problems we face. To be sure, the only long-term solution to the dilemma of illegal immigration is improving the economies of Mexico and other nations from which the immigrants spring. But what of the people who are here now without papers? We need to recast our philosophy about immigrants from third world lands. We must replace the policies that exclude people from participation in our economic and political life because of their race, language, or immigration status with policies that encourage people to participate in society. We need to get people involved. People are now alienated. Among Hispanics, this alienation affects citizens and legal residents as well as undocumented persons. We have all kinds of rules to keep people outside of the process. And when you exclude people, you deny the yearning for equality and participation that is so key to fulfillment and happiness. What changes do we have to make? Some kind of meaningful adjustment in the legal status of undocumented aliens is a critical first step. Whether this adjustment is known as amnesty or called by some other name, no workable proposal for dealing with the question of illegal immigration can succeed without it. Resolution of their status will enable undocumented workers to rid themselves of the pervasive fear that is so paralyzing, the fear that inhibits them from dealing with their exploitation like other American workers through the process of self-organization and collective bargaining. At the same time, we reckon with the problem of undocumented persons already in the country. We should emphatically reject schemes advanced by some Republican politicians and conservative grower groups to revive the infamous Bracero program. The politicians now call it by a new name, the Guest Worker Program. But a fancy title cannot sugarcoat that evil system of replacing domestic farm workers with a new class of slave laborers imported from outside the U.S. to defeat unions and depress wages and working conditions. Next, we must dramatically reform the U.S. Immigration and Naturalization Service. Perhaps it should be eliminated altogether. In our experience, it is the most corrupt, most bigoted agency in our country. The INS has a long history of dealing with non-citizens, confronting poor humans who have no legal standing in society. So they feel they can kick them, beat them, demand money from them. They can do almost anything they want because they know these people are not citizens and can't respond. Today, many of the people who work for the INS see all Hispanics as aliens, even though we may be second, third, or fourth generation Americans. In their minds, we are not citizens. It is the worst gringo mentality to be found anywhere in the government. What of society's attitudes towards differences in culture and language? We all know of the so-called melting pot theory. It is taught in schools, preached from the pulpit, and proclaimed by politicians. This country is not a melting pot anymore. It used to be more of a melting pot when the bulk of immigrants were white Europeans. But with large numbers of third world people, particularly Asians, Latin Americans, and Africans, coming to our shores, it is no longer possible or desirable to anglicize the waves of new immigrants. We sometimes refer to those who oppose the struggles of minorities and people in the third world as the super Americans. They claim the melting pot theory still applies. They would like all of us to be melted, poured, and cast, and cloned into the all-American boy or girl. So we will all come out looking like Pat Boone and Anita Bryant. They would like all of us to buy their argument that the strength of our country is in its conformity to one ethnic and cultural heritage. But there are some of us Americans who share a different vision of what our nation is. The strength of America is not in her conformity. We believe that the strength of America is in her diversity. Our country is admired around the world, not as the new right claims because of her bombers and nuclear arsenal. We are admired for our Bill of Rights, and especially for the First Amendment, which protects diversity. Let us also be admired for our cultural and linguistic pluralism. For this country to continue to be great, we need to include people, but not strip them of their cultural values in the process. I can eat tortillas and still be an American. Our country needs to understand that. Groups of people will tolerate many things, but don't tamper with their language and don't threaten their religion and don't meddle with their food, or there's going to be a lot of problems. The greatest contribution our government and society can make is to recognize that we are all Americans, yet we are all different. There has never really been a melting pot. As Cantinflas says, juntos pero no revueltos. Together, but not together. We need to establish a federal Department of Cultural Affairs, a department in our government that recognizes we're all one nation, but also acknowledges the differences that make us unique and valuable as individuals and as part of the society. Such an agency could handle immigration and citizenship and be the guardian of the special cultural values each racial, ethnic, or linguistic group has to contribute. We must also unbridle our citizenship requirements. The laborious and protracted process often stands as an obstacle to full participation in political life for so many decent and patriotic people whose cultural or linguistic tradition has not yet fallen prey to Anglicization. A person should not become a citizen automatically, but a man or woman's character is what should really matter, not whether he or she speaks English or can survive the bureaucracy. What should count is the fact that he or she has lived here and is paying taxes and is making a contribution to the country. And of course, the person would have to say, yes, I want to live under this system. We must also change the voter registration laws as they now read. For the large part, they're very old and written in a time when everybody went to church on Sunday and took a bath on Tuesday. I would say we should end voter registration. Anyone who is a citizen should have the right to vote. What I'm really talking about, whether it's immigration or citizenship, cultural mores, or voting rights, is making it possible for more people to participate in the democratic process. If these changes come to pass, we will witness a radical reordering for the better in our country. For whenever new blood is transfused into our national, social, and political fabric, our nation is enriched and strengthened. I believe that kind of participation is the real fulfillment of democracy, a realization of humanity's greatest desires. If this country could foster those aspirations, we would not only be true to our best ideals, but we would provide an example for the world. So some very powerful words. I hope that you will all consider the words of César Chávez today as we honor the nation's Day of Independence, and remember that wisdom comes from so many places, and the power is in the people. The power is in us. We are America. We are democracy. And when we accept that we are a diverse nation and value that and appreciate that and celebrate that, that will be the day of our true independence. Thank you.